Hello and welcome to this ARWO Liquid Knowledge webinar. My name is Gina Veazey and I'll be your host today. We are having some small technical difficulties on our end, and we're not going to have video from our main speaker, but we do have her on audio, so we apologize for that. First, before we get started, I want to share some quick housekeeping details with you. Thanks for being here. And our session is being recorded, and we do that so that we can share a replay of the session with you later today. All attendees' mics are in mute, and we ask that you use the question mark at the top of your screen to log any questions that you may have as you have them throughout our broadcast, and we'll get to them at the end. And as I mentioned, we'll be emailing you with a replay of today's session toward the end of the day today. Today's sponsor is CoBank, and I know many of you are familiar with CoBank. They're an important sponsor to ARWO, and I know they're important to many of your organizations as well. So thank you to CoBank for making these possible. So now I would like to turn it over to Jerry Greiner. He is the president of the Northwestern Water and Sewer District in Bowling Green, Ohio, and he's going to introduce today's speaker for us.
Thanks, Gina, and thanks for Linda for taking the time to be with us. This is Linda Benoit. She's from Pinellas County, and she's had much experience with acquisitions in the water and sewer world. As some of you know, there's so many ways we find ourselves in the middle of these situations, and any help and guidance she can offer would be great to hear firsthand. Linda's been the Financial Services Division Director at Pinellas County Utilities for nearly 3 years. It's her second time with Pinellas County. She served previously as the Senior Budget Analyst and as a Budget Manager. For a short time, she left there to serve the Hillsborough County government as the Division Manager of Fiscal and Accounting Services in its Enterprise Solutions and Quality Assurance Department. Linda's a CPA, holds a Master of Accounting from Florida State University College of Business. We'll say go Seminoles. And Linda, it's all yours.
All right, thank you very much, and good afternoon if you're on the East Coast, and good morning if you're on the West Coast. So thank you for the lovely introduction and reading the bio, and let's see, what else did we not cover? As Financial Services Division Director of Pinellas County Utilities, I'm responsible for the entire financial life cycle of our water and sewer utility system. So that's procurement, financial planning, payments, budgeting, and even warehouse inventory, all of those components, cash collections, processing payments coming in the door from customers. So I have the financial responsibility here as a part of a county. I get the advantage of having access to some countywide services like HR and the finance department that does things like treasury. So Pinellas County Utilities, we are on the west coast of Florida, and every day we deliver 51 MGDs of water, 18 MGDs of reclaimed water, and 29 MGDs of wastewater processing or wastewater services to our 120,000 customers per day. And so I'm pleased to speak to you about our acquisition framework. And I've so far, in my relatively short time here, worked on 3 acquisitions, and we are just a county government. All right, I'm ready to go to slide 2. Gina?
Okay, you should be all set. This is your agenda slide.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good. So here's what we're going to cover today. And I'll not read that to you. You can read it. But these are all of the areas we're going to cover. All right. Let's see. slide 3. So, background and objectives. Why did we build an acquisition framework, and what have we learned? So, number one, why? So, as a county government utility, over the decades, we've acquired several other smaller city water and sewer systems. And what typically happens is it's several years in between them. And knowledge transfer just wasn't always available. It just wasn't always there, because even if people left notes in the file, between the previous acquisition and this most recent one we worked on was 8 years. And so we decided to define a process that helps us move through it in an orderly fashion, and it provides that framework so that when I retire, the next person knows exactly what to do. And the number one thing we have learned, you'll see on the slide, it says it takes a village, the whole village, all right? There is a misconception that these acquisitions are mainly a financial endeavor, and that is not true. I rely heavily on all my partners, and those are going to be for utilities operations, maintenance, engineering, the county legal department, and the county finance department. All of them play a very, very important role in getting this done. Slide 4, please. So here you should see a map of Pinellas County. And to the left side or the west side of the map is the Gulf of America or the Gulf of Mexico, depending on where you live. And then on the east side is Tampa Bay. And so we are surrounded by water on 3 sides. To the south of us is also Tampa Bay. And we are, in fact, the most densely populated county in Florida by people per square mile. We're 45 miles north to south, about 15 miles at the widest point. All right. There's about 1 million of us on this peninsula full-time, and there are a couple 100,000 more when we have our winter seasonal residents come visit us. And the good news is we have the best beaches. We have the best beaches everywhere. So you'll notice that there are a lot of cities issued, and I have a note on there that there are 24 municipalities in addition to the countywide government. The history of the 24 cities is that as Florida was developed and as our county was developed, little pockets of communities developed on their own, and mostly settled by farming and ranching families. And then gradually these became incorporated cities, and they expanded, and now they just touch borders. So when you drive around here, you pass a sign that says you've changed another city, and you drive a little further and you pass another sign that you're now in another city, okay? Without the signs, you might not know. So it's very dense, and we're all on top of each other. And as these grew up, originally most of these cities had their own small water and or sewer systems, all right? And it wasn't until 1937 that there was a countywide water system established. And then I might say, in addition to 24 municipalities and a county government, there is also a school board, a separate school board, and a separate public transit authority. So there are a lot of governments that all have to cooperate here. So you look at that kind of density, you know, and you see that there used to be a lot of systems in place. So go to slide 5, please. So here we have our utility service areas. You have the water service areas on the left and the sewer service areas on the right. We also have reclaimed water service area that is much smaller, and so I didn't show it here. Most of the cities, the individual cities, have their own sewer system, Some of them have their own reclaimed water systems if they have sewer. And there are several areas in the county that could become future acquisitions where they are running their own systems. So you can begin on these maps, you can begin to see kind of the patchwork. And why is it that a kind of a mid-sized county government is involved in acquisitions, right? It just seems, it doesn't seem to fit. Next slide, please. Slide 6. We're going to start into the framework of the framework itself and the overview. So we start with why the acquisition. We're going to go through due diligence, and then we're going to start to calculate a preliminary valuation. All right. Slide 7, please. So strategic objectives and why do an acquisition. There are many reasons why we might get into one. And the first point that I need to make in our situation is that the cities always ask us to explore an acquisition. We do this by request. We do not pursue the cities, okay? We do not pursue acquisitions of other systems. So the source of a request from one of these smaller systems could be any of these reasons. Our last 2 sewer acquisitions have been driven by an increasing regulatory requirements environment and, you know, the cost of future CIP needed to keep the system up to speed. In addition, for those of you following the news, last fall, our area got hit by not 1, not 2, but 3 hurricanes. So there was extensive damage in some of the lower lying areas, coastal areas, to both water and sewer systems. And that has actually caused, just this year, 3 additional inquiries about maybe we want you to take over our system. Okay, so we've got literally 3 more inquiries started. So our last water acquisition discussion was 2 years ago, actually 3 years ago, 2022. And it was driven by the need to replace decaying infrastructure. So there was a small city, there still is a small city, and they had their own water system, and they had an RO plant and some shallow wells. And they were beginning to get saltwater intrusion into these wells. In addition to that, they had a bunch of their pipelines were decaying. So we did an assessment, an engineering assessment of their system. And we had a wholesale water pipeline hooked up to their water system as emergency backup only, but not as primary supply. But their retail water distribution system, some of the pipelines had some pretty severe issues. They already had, you know, kind of the metal band-aids around them. Our assessment indicated, you know, millions of dollars of fixes that would need to be done and a negative valuation, right? They would pay us for us to take over the retail side of their water system. And so they balked at that and they said, no, tell you what, just turn on the valve and we'll become a wholesale customer. So sometimes the acquisitions don't go all the way through and get done, right? Sometimes you stop and they just balk at the price and they're like, we will do the capital improvements ourselves. Just upgrade the connection for the wholesale water, turn the valve, we'll turn off our wells, and, you know, we will take the wholesale water. So we did that in the first week of December of 23. So the funny story is, 1 week later, the roof of their water plant collapsed. Okay? So they were right on time with the decaying infrastructure component. That really happened. I'm not showing pictures, but it really happened. So all of these things can really lead to these kinds of acquisitions. All right, ready for slide number 8. So we're going to talk about the preliminary due diligence steps. So we have legal things to take care of, data to gather, and performance measures and checklist items. First, on the legal requirements, here in the state of Florida, there are statutes governing counties doing a proper analysis of acquisitions. Thankfully, the statutes actually make sense. It's nice when the laws align with good practice. And so a quick summary of our state statute is that the acquisition must be in the public interest. It must consider the profitability of the system, the asset value, the asset condition, reasonableness of the purchase price, okay? In other words, you need to do a proper financial analysis. And then it must be presented at an advertised public hearing of both the requestor and the acquirer. And there is a whole other set of rules if for some reason this acquisition is a privatization, okay? So we talk about data requirements in the next bullet, and on the next slide we go into that in detail. But the next thing I want to say at this stage is that each acquisition is very unique. This is what we've found. And so the checklists have to be customized, and a performance measure and program data that help to inform you of what's really going on in the system, and it helps to inform the valuation. Back to the potential water acquisition that didn't happen, we did an evaluation of they were happy to tell us that they had AMI water meters. They had 1,650 customers, small city. And they're like, yeah, we've got AMI water meters. So, you don't have to send meter readers around to get the water meter readings. But then we dug in deeper and we said, hey, can we see the performance of the communications of those AMI meters? And come to find out that a good 25% of those meters were no longer communicating. So you have to perform, you have to ask the next question. That's great that you have AMI meters. That's wonderful. And now, how are they doing? Are they still working? You also have to consider current conditions. I told you we just a year ago had 3 hurricanes come through here. 1 of minimal impact and 2 of much larger impact. And you have to not just to consider the issues that may have happened, the damage to the system assets, but you also have to consider if properties were damaged, okay, whether they are commercial properties or residential properties, then the historic volume of water usage that would also play into, let's say, sewer revenues, the historic usage volume that would be part of your revenue stream is no longer going to be there. So you've got certain structures that were simply destroyed during these storms. And so it's a little more difficult revenue projection when you are temporarily missing a revenue stream, but you know that those properties will be rebuilt. When they get rebuilt, the revenue stream will come back. So these are things to look at. You need to know how many properties are temporarily offline, if you would. What was their usage volume before? How long do we think it's going to take for these properties to be rebuilt and to get them back online again? Now, I'm talking about hurricanes, but this could be any natural disaster. It could be a tornado, it could be a flood, it could be an earthquake, it could be a fire, it could be any of those things that just completely wipes out any kind of a structure or a property. Okay, let's go on to slide 9 and talk about data gathering. So you can see there are different components of data gathering here. I mentioned earlier when I talked about it takes the village, the whole village. As a financial person, I rely on the expertise of my operations and maintenance and engineering colleagues. So in this context, a maintenance evaluation of pipelines would be, hey, let's send cameras through some, in the case of sewer, let's send cameras through some sewer pipes and see, are there blockages in there? You know, what's the condition of these pipes? Not just if they're cracked, but also if there are blockages. In our environment, being on the coast, we have a very real possibility of having what they call storm surge, which is just where the Gulf just overwhelms the coastal area, just goes right over the top, and it brings all of the sand with it, okay? So it buries that area in sand. So you can also have, if you have any kind of leakages in your sewer collection system, and this could be a manhole, you could have sand intrude into these pipes. So you could have a maintenance issue of just sand-filled pipes, okay, where there's no longer a lot of capacity to carry the wastewater. Instead, it's half full of sand. So that's not necessarily an engineering problem to solve so much as it is a maintenance issue. Okay, we're going to have to hire a company to come out and pig the lines and get the sand out of there, okay? We're going to have to get some clean out done of these sewer lines. In the case of a water system, with sand overwhelming the coastal areas, you can have all of the meters and all of the valves and all of the hydrants buried in sand and bathed in salt water. So you can have a situation where you've got a lot of rust setting in on some of these assets. And then secondly, if they're buried in 5 feet of sand, they're kind of hard to find. So you need to know, one of your checklist items is, hey, city, do you have GPS coordinates on all of your assets? Very important to have that when all of your assets are suddenly buried under 5 feet of sand and you're trying to find one. So if you don't have the handheld device and the GPS coordinates, it's difficult to find that buried valve so you can turn off and stop a water leak. So this is just one of those maybe unexpected checklist items. I would make sure that your acquisition requester has GPS tagged all of their main assets. You can also have, in the case of operations, if it's a sewer system and there are pumping stations, lift stations, or large force main pumps, you would want to assess the condition of those pumps, make sure they're in good working order. Have they had regular maintenance done on them? That kind of thing. Another, engineering is to look at the condition of the pipes, look at the condition of the physical condition of the pipes, the physical condition of the manholes. Are the pipes and manholes lined? Do the manholes have rain inserts? The rain inserts stop, just regular rains from puddling over the top of a manhole and having rainwater just seep down into the pipes and cause a lot of I&I. One of the most valuable things we did with the acquisition we're working on now for a sewer system, one of the coastal sewer systems, is that we got the volume of water going into that city They have about 650 customers, very small city on the coast. And so we were able to look at the monthly volume of potable water being delivered to the customers within the city limits. And this city happens to be a wholesale customer of our wastewater system. They have asked to sell the collection system and become a retail customer, retail wastewater. So we know the volume going through the wholesale meter, coming back to our wastewater plant. And so we compared the volume of wastewater coming back to the plant to the volume of potable water being delivered to all those same meters. And pre-hurricanes, there was about 110% of wastewater as compared to potable water. So definitely some I&I happening. Post-hurricanes, we were now at 150% wastewater to potable water. So the condition of the collection pipes and the manholes has gotten significantly worse. We suspect it's due to storm damage. But there was and this was a consistent over several months. It wasn't just during the storm that I&I went through the roof, but for months and months after, matter of fact, continuing on. So with that in mind, we had to reassess. We were halfway done with that acquisition. 3 hurricanes come through, significant damage, restarted, discussions with the city, had to go out and reassess the system. We actually had to raise the price. Okay, that was bad news for the city, but that's due diligence, isn't it? That's due diligence. Significant event occurred, probably a lot of damage. You have to think properly. I know that our county administrator, some folks call it the county manager, our county administrator, would have expected that we would reassess, after such damaging storms. So for instance, another thing to ask about, right, is what is the maintenance plan on whatever system that you are acquiring. You don't even have to assume that there's been some kind of natural disaster. Even without a natural disaster, when a system is struggling, maintenance gets deferred. That is one of the first things that happens. So you just want to find out what the maintenance plan is and what is the records. It's another indicator of the condition of the assets, right? And finally, when you look at the volumetric data running through the system, you want to make sure you analyze that for seasonality. No matter where you live, no matter what your climate, there is typically a seasonal water use. And that can define both potable and sewer charges. And so if you have a rate structure that is tiered rates, or where your sewer rates are based on some volume up to a cap, you want to look in the predictability of those revenues. You want to make sure you look at the seasonality. Otherwise, the tiered rates and the caps won't line up month to month to month the way they would be billed. I would just advise, don't look at these things annually. Look at them seasonally or monthly. Okay, next slide. Okay. Slide 10, we talk about valuation analysis. Technically, there are 4 different approaches to valuation. The asset approach is challenging in this kind of an environment. Because often if someone is asking us to acquire their system, often the assets are struggling, okay? So with this latest wastewater collection system that we are almost to contract to finish acquiring, if you looked at the city's financial statements, the sewer system, the sewer enterprise assets were almost fully depreciated. They were like 99% fully depreciated. So as a finance geek, I look at that and say, oh my gosh, they haven't bought anything new in forever, right? Because pipes get depreciated over 20 or 30 years. A pump station is 20 or 30 years. And so if you're looking at assets that are 99% depreciated, they haven't replaced anything in 20 years, okay? Maybe even 30. So it's an indicator of position, condition. But if you look at that and you said, oh, well, what's the value of what I'm acquiring? Well, the value of what I'm acquiring is pretty minimal because it's pretty well used up. So also, you could have some land assets that you might be acquiring depending on what's involved. And so there may be some valuation of land assets. One of the things to watch out for, I think I covered this later on the legal side, is if there's a pump station, a lift station, or a force main pump, they're probably sitting on city property. And if, as an acquirer, if you're going to own those things, you may or may not be owning the land, but you've got to make sure you get an easement, okay, to operate on that piece of real estate. The market approach is difficult because it's hard to get comp sales on a water system or a sewer system. Not very useful. The income approach has been our focus. That lines up with what you heard me talk about with the state statutes. And that lines up there because you have to consider the stream of revenues and expenses incremental approach. Discounted cash flows, right? And this requires estimating cost inflation for both operating costs and future capital spend. And often the inflation of operating costs is a different number than the inflation on future capital spend. In addition to that, you've got to look at what are future probable future rate increases where the revenue stream might go up. And you have to compute a discount rate to discount it back. You may also have to compute a cost of borrowing funds. If there are significant capital improvements needed on the front end, you may have to borrow in order to complete those capital improvements. Then you've got to add in the cost of borrowing into the analysis. The other option is debt-bearing capacity, and that focuses on how much debt service would be needed, or how much debt service will the net revenue stream support. And of course, then you discount that back and convert it into a net present value. It is so important to get that operational and engineering data and to have your engineers calculate, what is the cost of the capital improvements needed and what is the cost of scheduled continuing maintenance as well as typical unscheduled continuing maintenance. Okay, on to the next slide, please. Contract for sale of purchase, I'm sorry. So I talked about it takes a village, and the village includes your attorneys. And things you want to make sure are in the contract, got a list here. In our case, because all of our acquisitions start with a request from a city. Their governing body would approve it first. Typically, that's a city council of some kind or a city commission. They would approve it first. Then it comes to our governing body, and they approve it. In each case, there's a public hearing. One of the super important things that you have to do is you have to have a slide in this presentation that gives the net monthly bill impact of the customers. So it's important to disclose what this does to the customers, okay? Because if you're an elected official, that's your first question. What's my customer impact? Okay, on to the next slide, please. So we have quite a few lessons learned from doing these. So the first one, number one, is when people approach you about an acquisition, secure a signed letter of intent between the parties before you start work. Because this is a big investment of staff time. Don't commit that staff time unless the other party is serious, okay? We don't ask people to put money on the table, but we do ask them to sign on the dotted line and say, I'm really serious, okay? In addition to that, our county administrator requires that the requester fund or provide the system asset analysis. In other words, the analysis of the condition of the pipelines and or the pumps and or the meters, that kind of thing. If we pay for that and then the system acquisition doesn't go through, then our current customers end up absorbing the cost of an assessment of somebody else's system that isn't part of our larger system. So that's an unfair burden on our current customers. Next, sometimes if the acquisition value comes up negative, all right, the city may say, wow, we don't have enough money in reserves in our enterprise fund to be able to afford this. And we're going to have to do a special assessment. And they would ask if we would do a special assessment. And this is the fourth bullet point. That city has contacted us and asked us to help, okay? So therefore, we're not the bad guys. We're just not the bad guys. We're not the people charging you extra and so forth and so on. So we don't want to have a special assessment on the customers in that city. If that is needed, we're going to ask the city to do that themselves. We don't want this transaction to negatively impact our relationship with that group of customers, if that makes sense. I would say also, if you do the valuation yourself, do engage a financial consultant to review the data and the calculation work. Just get a second set of eyes on that. We have a continuing contract with a water and sewer utilities financial consultant. And so we engage them for just a few hours of their time to look over this latest one, you know, from the standpoint of, hey, did we miss anything? Do you have any input on some of these other figures we had to put in here, like the discount rate, the estimated cost of borrowing to fund the capital improvements needed, that kind of thing. So it's very helpful to have a second set of eyes on this. Even if you just engage them for 20 hours, it's not a big spend. So in our case, with this, there were politics in play. So as you recall, we live in a small peninsula all on top of each other. So if I've got one city and their commissioners working on an acquisition, I've got to make sure that my county commissioners are aware that this is going on, because they run into each other at events and things. And you don't want your own elected officials to be surprised, your own governing board to be surprised that you're working on this with somebody else's governing board. So we try to just at least give our governing board updates and let them know that we are in process of doing this evaluation and working on the acquisition with them, okay? In addition to that, if it's a very small city, like the one we're almost finished with now, we engage our communications experts to assist that small city with a communication plan for their customers for the upcoming change. Often the very small cities just don't have the resources to do that. And it's helpful to have folks who are communications experts. They do so much of a better job of wording things to be understood, so much better than I would or so many of my other colleagues. So the communications experts, they're also part of the village. All right. So next slide for you, you'll be happy to know. First of all, the whole slide deck will be sent out to all the participants. This is a blank letter of intent. The whole letter will be one of the attachments. Okay, it didn't all fit on this slide, and I couldn't embed it in the slide. Otherwise, it was going to make the slide presentation a very large file. So the full letter, a blank letter of intent, is attached as part of the materials that you'll receive after today's presentation. Okay. Next slide. This is one page from the acquisition framework. The whole acquisition framework is also attached and will be part of the attachments that you'll receive at the end of the presentation. So this is just one page of the checklist. It's a 3-page checklist of operational data, financial data, engineering data. And you'll notice in the letter of intent that it says, hey, here's what we need to do, and we've attached a checklist, and be prepared to supply the things in the checklist. Okay, and the checklist is these items that are in the framework. All right, and so the whole thing is the entire framework, and the checklist will be attached, and you'll get a copy of it. Okay, so then the next slide is just time for questions. So I'll ask Gina if there are any questions that have been typed into the question area.
So thank you so much, Linda, for that. Yes, we do have some questions. We've got quite a few here. Let me try to make best use of our time. So we have a question about, did Pinellas County compete with any investor-owned utilities trying to acquire any of the utilities that you've had conversations with? And do you think your county leadership would have modified its approach or offers to be more attractive against an investor-owned utility? Or would their position pretty much be, this is the offer?
Thank you. What a great question.
It is.
So the water utility that we analyzed and came up with a big cost to acquire, and they walked away from that and said, never mind, just turn the valve and we'll be your wholesale customer, right? They had gotten an offer from a private water utility. So we looked at their system and said, there's a lot of capital improvements needed here. You're going to have to pay us like $3 million or something around that number. The private utility said, we'll give you $2 million. Okay. And we said no, it's going to cost $3 million to bring your system up to speed. So, if you don't want, that's fine. Feel free to go deal with the private utility. Okay. Because we're in a situation where we don't need them, right? We have a lot of customers, we have a lot of people we handle, so we don't feel like we compete with them. But every now and then they come on the scene, and we do have a kind of a response for that, which is we're not going to put our current customers at risk, at financial risk, in order to compete with a private utility who will initially lowball and then later jack up the retail rates in order to recover their investment.
Okay. So we have a couple of people who are a little worried about what happens to employees. And so let me ask you, so what happens to employees and unions in an acquisition? And this is a two-parter that has two different parts. Go ahead with that and answer that question, and then I'll give you the other half.
Okay. Let's see, 10 years ago, we acquired a sewer system, and it had one employee, and we took that employee on, okay? So a lot of these cities that say, I can't take it anymore with their little water system or little sewer system, okay, don't have very many staff. They really don't have very many staff engaged in these activities. Right now in the current labor market, we have openings, right, in our maintenance division. And so we are happy to, if there's an employee that's experienced in being displaced in one of these transactions, we typically will take them on, okay? We don't have unions. We are blessed by that. We're kind of an oddball that way, but we don't have unions in our government. So if someone is in a union in their current employment and they choose to come work for us, then they are just subject to our, let's say, labor conditions, okay, our employment environment.
That makes sense, or at least it does to me. So after you've done these acquisitions, you like many regional water organizations are, have combined numerous systems. Do you have multiple rates throughout the Pinellas system?
We do not. So if we acquire either a water system or a sewer system, they come onto our rate structure.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, if there's a special assessment needed because the city had to pay us to take it on, then the city applies that special assessment and not us.
Okay. This is another good question. Does the state of Florida have policies or positions that encourage or discourage acquisitions that you've encountered through this process?
Neither. It doesn't encourage or discourage. They just set the rules, which is if you're a government and you're doing an acquisition, you have to go through this process, including public hearings. If it's a private acquisition, there's a more expensive process for approval. They don't. They just say if you're going to do it, here's the rules.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about, we talked a little about having one uniform rate across your system, but so you've talked about your communications. What's been the nature of rate changes that your customers have experienced through these acquisitions? And then, what kind of challenges have you had explaining that? It's maybe a big question, but
Sure.
you speak to that a
Sure.
little. Mhm.
So as you can imagine, both in a retail water environment and in a retail wastewater environment, you're going to have different rate structures. Each utility, has come up with their rate structure that works best for their customers. In the water environment, it might be, a flat monthly fee plus volumetric, and the volumetric may or may not have tiers, right? A low tier and a higher tier and a super high tier, right? On the wastewater side, it could be a monthly fee and then some limited volumetric tied to potable use. And also those rates could differ by customer class. Could be residential, single family, could be residential in a condo tower, could be commercial. In our world, we have a lot of hotels, okay? Out by the beaches, lots of big, tall hotels. And so each municipality or each system has developed customer classes and rates for each of those customer classes. So what we have found with the last two that we're actually doing, and then the water system we almost did but didn't, is it's a mixed bag. So what we found is our residential customers fared better under the county rates than what the city rates were. The commercial customers didn't. The commercial customers were better off under the city rates than they were under the county rates. So you end up with a mixed bag. And so then as part of your communication, you want to stratify that communication in groups of people and how they are affected.
Okay. I think that addresses most of the questions that we had come through. So I want to thank you, Linda, for being on the call, and apologize again for the technical difficulties that we've had. But nonetheless, before you all go, I want to make sure that you are aware of our next webinar, and I want to invite you to register for that. You should do it right now. And there's a code on your screen you can scan with your smartphone. Our next webinar is September 10th, and it is titled Applying Disney's World-Class Guest Service to Your Utility. And we have a really qualified speaker who launched the Disney Service Basics as an exec at Walt Disney World Resort. And she spent 20 years there. Her name is Heather Havey. Many of you may know her. She's with Toho Water Authority. And she also led the contact center at Disney that handled post-visit guest recovery. So I'm curious to ask her what that is exactly, because it sounds like it might be a little scary. But I think it's all about customer service. And but under her leadership at Toho, she has introduced a program called Toho's Promise, and it is a customer service philosophy that draws on the Disney philosophy. And she's going to be sharing some of those insights, and I'm sure there will be some how-tos as well. So it's one that you're not going to want to miss. And I hope that you will scan the QR code on your screen and register for the session. Like I said, you can do it now. You've got we're giving you back 5 minutes or so of your day. So do it now, register, and we will see you in about a month. And you'll hear from us later today by email. Thanks again, and we will see you soon.